So, you're curious about The Last House 2026, huh? Well, buckle up because this Netflix thriller has been making waves and honestly, there's a lot to unpack here. Let me walk you through everything you need to know about this film that's got everyone talking. The movie drops us right into the action with a pretty straightforward premise at first glance. We've got a team of tactical specialists who respond to what seems like a routine call. But of course, nothing is ever routine in these movies, right? The house they're investigating turns out to be way more than they bargained for. What starts as a standard operation quickly spirals into something far more complex and morally ambiguous. The team finds themselves caught in a web of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas that challenge everything they thought they knew about their mission and each other. It's one of those situations where every door they open just leads to more questions. And trust me, the film milks that tension for all it's worth. Now let's talk about the main characters because, honestly, that's where this film really tries to shine. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck reunite on screen, and you can tell there's this comfortable energy between them that comes from years of friendship and collaboration. Their dynamic is supposed to be the backbone of the film, playing off each other in ways that feel natural and lived in. Damon's character is more of the by-the-book type, someone who believes in following protocol and doing things the right way, while Affleck brings this world-weary quality to his role, like he's seen too much and knows that rules don't always lead to justice. It's an interesting contrast that the film explores throughout its runtime. The role these two play in the overall narrative is pretty central. They're not just team members. They're the moral compass, or at least they're supposed to be. Damon's character represents idealism and faith in the system, while Affleck's represents pragmatism and understanding that sometimes the world operates in shades of gray rather than black and white. The script gives them plenty of moments to debate, clash, and ultimately question their own beliefs as the situation in the house becomes more complicated. You can see the film trying to use their relationship as a microcosm for larger themes about justice, loyalty, and what it means to do the right thing when the right thing isn't clear. Captain Jackie Wells is introduced as a formidable presence within the narrative. She's the kind of character who commands respect the moment she walks into a room, and the film makes sure you understand her importance early on. Her role in the story is multifaceted because she's not just a superior officer giving orders from a distance. She's intimately connected to the events that unfold. And as the layers peel back, we start to see that her involvement runs deeper than anyone initially realized. Jackie represents authority and institutional power, but the film doesn't let her remain a simple archetype. There's complexity there, motivations that aren't immediately apparent, and decisions she's made that have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Her position in the plot becomes increasingly pivotal as things progress. The team looks to her for guidance, but there's this underlying tension about whether that guidance can be trusted. The film plays with our expectations here, making us question, along with the characters, whether Jackie is part of the solution or part of the problem. It's a delicate balancing act, and whether the film pulls it off successfully is something we'll get into later. But the attempt to create a layered authority figure is definitely there. When the team enters the house, they're expecting to find evidence related to their investigation. But what they actually discover is way more complicated than a simple evidence recovery. The house itself becomes almost a character in the story, filled with secrets hidden in plain sight. There are documents, recordings, photographs, all sorts of materials that paint a picture of something much larger than a single incident. Each room seems to hold another piece of a puzzle that keeps expanding the more they explore. The film uses the physical space really effectively to create this sense of uncovering layer after layer of deception. What makes the discovery particularly interesting is how it affects each team member differently. Some of what they find confirms suspicions they've had, while other revelations completely blindside them. There are connections to people they know, evidence of activities they didn't think were possible, and implications that reach far beyond the four walls of this house. The script smartly uses these discoveries to ratchet up tension not just externally, but within the team itself. As different members react in different ways to what's being revealed, it's not just about finding clues, it's about what those clues mean and how they change everything the team thought they understood about their mission. Desi emerges as a crucial element in the overall narrative structure. Without getting into specifics that would cross certain lines, let's just say this character represents innocence, caught in the middle of a very adult situation. The presence of Desi adds emotional stakes to what could otherwise be a straightforward procedural thriller. Suddenly, it's not just about solving a case or following orders. It's about protecting someone vulnerable from the machinery of larger forces at play. The film uses this character to humanize the story, to give our team members something concrete to fight for beyond abstract concepts of justice or duty. The importance of Desi to the plot cannot be overstated, because this character becomes the linchpin that everything else revolves around. Decisions about what to do with evidence, who to trust, whether to follow orders or go rogue, all of these choices become more complicated when there's an innocent life hanging in the balance. The film tries to use this to add moral weight to the proceedings, forcing characters to confront what they're really willing to do and what lines they won't cross. Whether you think it's effective emotional manipulation or genuine character development probably depends on your tolerance for this kind of storytelling device, but it's definitely a central pillar of how the narrative functions. Talking about who directed this thing, we're looking at a filmmaker who's been making waves in the streaming space for a while now. The director brings a particular sensibility to the material, favoring a gritty, grounded approach over flashy stylistics. You can see influences from classic procedural thrillers mixed with more contemporary concerns about surveillance, privacy, and institutional trust. The director's previous work has shown a knack for creating tense, confined space scenarios, and that experience definitely comes into play here with the house setting, serving as this pressure cooker environment where tensions can build naturally. What's interesting about the directorial choices is the focus on character reactions over action spectacle. Sure, there are tense moments and sequences that get your pulse racing, but the camera often lingers on faces, on the subtle shifts in expression as characters process information or make difficult decisions. It's a more restrained approach than you might expect from a Netflix thriller, prioritizing psychological tension over physical confrontation. Whether that works for everyone is debatable. Some viewers might find it a bit slow, but there's definitely intentionality behind these choices. The screenplay comes from a writing team that's been developing this story for quite some time. From what I understand, the script went through several iterations before landing at Netflix, getting polished and refined along the way. The writers clearly have ambitions beyond just delivering a standard thriller. There's an attempt here to weave in commentary about institutional corruption, the moral compromises people make in service of the greater good, and the question of whether the ends ever truly justify the means. Sometimes the script is subtle about these themes, letting them emerge naturally from the action, and other times it gets a bit heavy-handed, with characters essentially stating the themes out loud in dialogue. The structure of the screenplay is pretty interesting because it plays with timeline and perspective in ways that keep you engaged. We get flashbacks that fill in backstory, perspective shifts that show us different characters' points of view on the same events, and a generally non-linear approach that rewards attention. The writers clearly trust the audience to keep up and piece things together, which is refreshing. That said, there are moments where the cleverness of the structure might work against clarity, and you might find yourself having to mentally rewind to make sure you caught all the connections. It's a balancing act, and your mileage may vary on whether it enhances the experience or just makes it unnecessarily complicated. As for where you can actually watch this thing, The Last House 2026 is a Netflix original, which means it's exclusive to their platform. This is part of Netflix's continued push into original thriller content, especially films that can generate conversation and social media buzz. The streaming model actually works pretty well for this kind of movie because it allows for a more patient pace than you might get in a theatrical release that needs to justify ticket prices with constant action. You can pause, rewind if you missed something, or even watch it in chunks if that's your style, though honestly, the film works best as a single viewing experience where the tension can build without interruption. The Netflix release also means the film had a decent budget to work with in terms of production values and casting. You can see that on screen in the quality of the cinematography, the detail in the production design, and the caliber of actors they were able to attract. At the same time, being a streaming release means it doesn't have the same cultural footprint as a major theatrical release might. It's easier for it to get lost in the shuffle of content unless it really breaks through, which is why Netflix has been pushing it pretty hard in their promotional materials. Now, as for what inspired this whole story, it's not a direct adaptation of a specific true event or existing property. Instead, the film is based on a more general inspiration drawn from various real-world situations involving institutional oversight, tactical operations that went sideways, and the complicated moral territory that law enforcement and military personnel sometimes find themselves in. The writers have mentioned in interviews that they were interested in exploring what happens when good people find themselves in impossible situations with no clear right answer. They pulled from news stories, documentaries, and conversations with people who've worked in these fields to create something that feels grounded, even as it takes dramatic liberties. The historical basis is more thematic than factual, if that makes sense. The film isn't saying this specific thing happened, but rather, things like this happen, and here's one possible story exploring those dynamics. It's inspired by reality without being constrained by it, which gives the filmmakers freedom to craft their narrative while still maintaining that feeling of authenticity. Whether that approach resonates with you probably depends on what you're looking for in your thriller entertainment. Some people appreciate the connection to real-world issues, while others might prefer pure fiction that doesn't pretend to comment on actual institutions or events. The production team behind this film is pretty stacked with talent. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck aren't just starring. They're also serving as producers through their production company, which gives them significant creative control over the final product. This means the film reflects their sensibilities and interests. For better or worse, they've been pretty open about wanting to make thoughtful thrillers that don't talk down to audiences, and you can see that ambition in how the film is structured and the themes it tackles. Joining them as producers are several industry veterans who've worked on successful thriller properties before. This isn't anyone's first rodeo, and that experience shows in the professionalism of the production. The producing team was apparently very hands-on during filming, working closely with the director to make sure the vision was being executed properly. There's also involvement from producers who specifically focus on the streaming space and understand what works for that medium versus traditional theatrical releases. It's a collaborative effort that brings together different perspectives and areas of expertise. The creation story of how this film came together is actually pretty interesting. From what's been shared publicly, the initial concept was developed several years ago, but struggled to find the right home. Various studios considered it but passed, feeling it was either too ambitious for the budget or not commercial enough for their slate. Then Netflix came into the picture with their model of taking chances on mid-budget films that might not fit the theatrical landscape but could thrive on streaming. That partnership allowed the project to finally move forward with the resources it needed. The inspiration for the filmmakers goes beyond just the plot mechanics. There's clearly an interest in exploring trust and betrayal within tight-knit teams, the psychological pressure of being in life-or-death situations, and the way information can change everything you thought you knew. The director has mentioned being inspired by classic paranoid thrillers from the 70s, where institutions couldn't be trusted and protagonists found themselves questioning everything. There's also a modern update to those concerns, bringing in contemporary issues around surveillance technology, data privacy, and the ways that information can be weaponized or manipulated. It's an ambitious blend of old-school thriller sensibilities with modern anxieties. Moving on to the broader cast beyond the headline names, The Last House 2026 actually assembled a really solid ensemble of character actors and rising stars. You've got Steven Yeun, who's been on an incredible trajectory since his breakthrough, bringing depth and intensity to his role as a team member with his own complicated backstory. Then there's Teyana Taylor, who continues to prove she's got serious acting chops beyond her music career, playing a character who serves as something of a wild card in the group dynamic. The supporting cast also includes some familiar faces from television who might not be household names, but who bring real credibility to their roles. What I appreciate about the casting is that it feels considered. These aren't just people filling slots. Each actor brings something specific to their character that enriches the overall ensemble. You've got different energy levels, different approaches to the work, and that variety makes the team feel authentic. In real tactical units or investigation teams, you'd have a mix of personalities and styles, and the film captures that. Some characters are more volatile, others more analytical. Some rely on intuition, while others stick to procedure. This diversity in approach creates natural friction and debate within the group, which drives a lot of the character-based drama. The performances across the board are pretty solid, with most actors rising to the challenge of the material. Damon and Affleck bring the gravitas you'd expect, using their experience to anchor the emotional core of the film. They understand how to play scenes with restraint, letting moments breathe rather than overselling every beat. It's professional, competent work that serves the story. Yoon is particularly compelling in his role, bringing this quiet intensity that makes you pay attention whenever he's on screen. He's great at playing characters who seem calm on the surface, but who you sense have a lot going on underneath. And that skill is put to good use here. Taylor holds her own completely, which is no small feat when you're sharing scenes with actors who've been doing this for decades. Her character has some of the more emotionally demanding moments in the film, and she delivers them with conviction. The chemistry among the cast is generally strong, which is crucial for a film that relies so heavily on group dynamics and shifting alliances. You buy that these people have worked together, that they have history and established relationships. That foundation makes the conflicts and betrayals that emerge feel more impactful, because we believe in the baseline connections being tested. The dynamic between the leads specifically is one of the film's strongest assets. Damon and Affleck have known each other since childhood, and that history translates to an easy rapport on screen that you simply can't fake. There's a shorthand between them, a way of playing off each other that feels natural. The script gives them several key scenes where they debate strategy and morality, and these moments work because you believe these are two people who respect each other, but don't always agree. The friction feels real rather than manufactured for drama's sake. What's particularly effective is how the chemistry evolves as the story progresses and secrets are revealed. The trust and camaraderie that exists at the beginning gets tested and strained, and you can see that in how the actors adjust their interactions. Looks linger a little longer, carrying suspicion. Words are chosen more carefully. The physical space between characters increases as emotional distance grows. It's subtle work that rewards attention, and it's a testament to the actors' skills that they can convey so much about shifting relationships through these small adjustments. The other cast members also develop meaningful chemistry with each other and the leads. Yoon's character has particularly interesting dynamics with both Damon and Affleck's characters, serving as something of a bridge between their different philosophies. Taylor's character brings a different energy entirely, and her interactions with the others help modulate the tone, preventing things from getting too heavy or one note. The ensemble really does function as an ensemble, with everyone contributing to the overall tapestry, rather than just waiting for their spotlight moments. Steven Yeun plays a tactical specialist who's described as one of the more experienced members of the team. His character has been doing this work for years and has developed both exceptional skills and some significant psychological baggage from what he's witnessed and done. The role allows Yoon to tap into his ability to play characters who maintain professional composure while dealing with internal struggles. There's a complexity to the character that goes beyond the surface, with hints of past trauma and moral compromises that inform his decisions in the present. The script gives him several moments to shine, particularly in sequences where his expertise becomes crucial to the team's survival and success. What's interesting about how Yoon approaches the character is the economy of his performance. He's not doing a lot of big showy acting. Instead, it's all in the eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he positions himself in a room. You get the sense of someone who's always assessing, always thinking 3 steps ahead, but who's also carrying weight from his past. The character serves an important function in the narrative by representing experience and capability, but also the cost of that experience. He's seen what can happen when things go wrong, and that knowledge makes him both an asset and a potential liability, depending on how paranoid and risk-averse it makes him. Teyana Taylor's character is a bit different in terms of what she brings to the team composition. She plays someone who's newer to this level of operation, still proving herself and eager to demonstrate her value. This creates an interesting dynamic because she's simultaneously capable and hungry to show that capability, which can lead to both brilliant initiative and reckless decisions depending on the situation. Taylor plays this balance really well, showing us someone who's confident in her abilities but still learning the subtle politics and judgment calls that come with experience. Her character often asks the questions that the audience might be wondering, serving as a useful perspective for viewers who aren't familiar with tactical procedures or institutional hierarchies. The role also gives Taylor opportunities to showcase range beyond what some might expect if they only know her music work. There are moments of vulnerability, moments of determination, moments where her character has to make split-second decisions with life-altering consequences. She handles all of it with commitment and believability. The character arc she's given allows for growth over the course of the film, as the events in the house force her to confront what she's really willing to do and what kind of person she wants to be in this line of work. It's a solid role that could have been one-dimensional in lesser hands, but which Taylor imbues with personality and depth. Now we're getting into territory where I need to be careful, because we're touching on plot specifics that could get problematic given the guidelines we're working with. What I can tell you is that the question of accountability for what happens to Captain Jackie Wells is central to the film's mystery structure. The script sets up multiple possibilities, giving various characters potential motives and opportunities. It's structured as a puzzle that the audience pieces together, along with the characters, with revelations that reframe what we thought we understood about earlier scenes. The film plays fair with the clues, mostly. If you're paying attention, there are hints and foreshadowing that point toward the eventual truth. But it's also constructed to keep you guessing, presenting red herrings and misdirection that lead you to suspect different characters at different points. The resolution of this particular mystery has implications that ripple throughout the entire narrative, affecting how we understand character motivations and the larger conspiracy at play. Whether the reveal feels earned or like a cheat probably depends on your personal tolerance for twist-driven storytelling and whether you think the clues were sufficient. What's important about this plot element is less the specific mechanics of what happened and more what it represents thematically. The circumstances surrounding Captain Wells become a lens through which the film examines institutional corruption, personal loyalty, and the question of whether there's ever justification for operating outside the law. Different characters have different reactions to the truth when it comes out, and those reactions tell us a lot about who they are and what they believe. The film uses this as a catalyst for forcing characters to declare where they stand on the moral spectrum it's been exploring. The question of which team member might be compromised or working against the group's interests is another key element of the paranoid thriller atmosphere the film cultivates. From early on, there's this creeping sense that not everyone can be trusted, that someone might be feeding information to outside parties or actively sabotaging the mission. The script seeds this suspicion carefully, giving us moments where characters behave slightly off, or where information seems to leak in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's effective in creating tension within the group and making the audience constantly reassess who we think we can trust. The revelation of internal compromise, when it comes, is designed to be both surprising and inevitable in hindsight. The film wants you to feel like you should have seen it coming, while still being caught off guard by the specific identity of the person involved. This is tricky to pull off because you can easily tip too far in either direction, making it too obvious or completely out of left field. The execution here is decent, though opinions will definitely vary on whether it works. Some viewers will appreciate the complexity of having a character whose loyalties are divided or who's been forced into an impossible position, while others might feel manipulated by the storytelling. What makes this element more interesting than just a simple "who's the traitor" plot is that the film tries to complicate the moral dimensions of it. The character in question isn't necessarily evil or even entirely wrong in their motivations. They might have reasons that we can understand, even if we don't agree with their methods. This ambiguity is clearly intentional, fitting with the film's broader interest in moral gray areas and the ways that good intentions can lead to questionable actions. It's more sophisticated than just having a mustache-twirling villain, even if it doesn't always land with the impact the filmmakers probably hoped for. The FBI's involvement in the story adds another layer of institutional complexity and potential conflict. They represent federal authority and oversight, which immediately puts them at odds with the more local or specialized team that our main characters belong to. The film uses the FBI presence to explore jurisdictional tensions, different investigative philosophies, and the question of who really has authority in a situation where multiple agencies have interest. There's the classic tension between people who are in the field dealing with immediate circumstances and people who are managing the situation from a distance with different priorities and concerns. The specific FBI agents we meet are characterized as competent, but operating with their own agenda that doesn't necessarily align with our protagonist's goals. They're concerned with bigger picture issues, larger investigations and prosecutions that might be jeopardized by how the immediate situation is handled. This creates conflict because what's best for a federal case isn't always what's best for the people on the ground or for achieving justice in this specific instance. The film explores this friction pretty thoroughly, using it to raise questions about bureaucracy, the politics of law enforcement, and whether the system is designed to achieve justice or just to perpetuate itself. One of the more interesting aspects of the FBI's role is how their involvement changes the stakes and dynamics for our main characters. Suddenly, there are new players to navigate, new potential threats or allies depending on how things shake out. Information that might have stayed contained becomes subject to federal oversight. Decisions that could have been made by the team now require coordination with people who don't share their history or necessarily their values. It complicates everything, which is exactly what the script intends. The FBI becomes representative of external pressures and the way that even well-meaning institutional involvement can make difficult situations even harder to navigate. The money aspect of the plot is another key element that I can discuss in terms of its narrative function without getting into specifics that might be problematic. There's a significant amount of currency that becomes a focal point of the investigation and the various competing interests at play. This money represents different things to different characters and factions within the story. For some, it's evidence of corruption that needs to be secured and used in prosecution. For others, it's a temptation, a life-changing amount of resources that could solve personal problems or fund other priorities. The film uses the presence of this money to test character and reveal true motivations. What happens with the money by the film's conclusion is meant to be somewhat ambiguous and thought-provoking rather than neatly resolved. The filmmakers seem interested in leaving the audience with questions about justice, restitution, and whether the right outcome is always the legal outcome. Without spoiling specific plot mechanics, I can say that the resolution involves difficult choices about who has the stronger claim to these resources and whether following the letter of the law serves the spirit of justice. Different viewers will likely have different opinions about whether the characters make the right call, which seems to be exactly what the film wants to provoke. The money also serves as a MacGuffin of sorts, a concrete object that various parties are trying to control or protect. This gives the plot a clear physical objective that grounds the more abstract moral and philosophical debates. It's easier to build tension around characters trying to secure or prevent access to something tangible than around pure ideology. The script uses the money smartly in this regard, making it both a plot device and a thematic element that illuminates character, while also driving the action forward. The character of Jammer, who gets mentioned in the promotional materials and early scenes, represents another thread in the complex web of relationships and agendas that the film explores. This character has history with some of the team members and presents a particular perspective on the events unfolding. The goals and motivations attributed to Jammer are layered, not simply good or bad, but rather understandable from a certain point of view, while still potentially antagonistic to our protagonist's objectives. The film tries to give this character dimension beyond just being an obstacle or threat. The objectives that Jammer pursues regarding the team are rooted in a combination of personal history, professional obligation, and moral conviction. There's a sense that this character genuinely believes they're doing the right thing, even as their actions create problems for the people we've been following. This creates more interesting conflict than if Jammer were simply evil or corrupt. Instead, we have competing versions of justice and righteousness, with each side able to articulate why they think they're in the right. The film asks us to consider these different perspectives rather than simply picking a side, though it definitely guides us towards sympathy with our main characters through structure and screen time. The relationship between Jammer and the team evolves over the course of the film as circumstances change and new information comes to light. Alliances shift, temporary truces form and break, and the question of whether Jammer is ultimately friend or foe remains in flux longer than you might expect. This fluidity keeps the dynamics interesting and prevents the character from becoming a static obstacle. The performance and writing work together to create someone who feels like a real person with understandable motivations rather than just a plot function which elevates the material. Switching gears to talk about the visual approach, The Last House 2026 has a very specific aesthetic that supports its tone and themes. The cinematography favors a naturalistic look over glossy stylization, using available light sources and practical lighting setups that make the environments feel real and lived in rather than like a movie set. The color palette is fairly desaturated, lots of grays and blues and muted earth tones that create a somber, serious atmosphere. This isn't a bright, poppy thriller. It's consciously drab in a way that emphasizes the gritty reality of the situation these characters are in. The camera work tends toward handheld or Steadicam in the more intense sequences, creating a sense of immediacy and immersion. You feel like you're in the space with the characters rather than watching from a comfortable remove. At the same time, it's not so shaky or frenetic that it becomes disorienting or hard to follow. The cinematographer finds a nice balance between documentary-style realism and the controlled composition needed to tell the story clearly. There are some really nice shot compositions that use the architecture of the house to create frames within frames, emphasizing the feeling of being trapped or watched. Lighting plays a huge role in establishing mood and guiding our emotional response to scenes. The house itself is often dimly lit, with characters using flashlights or relying on whatever ambient light filters through windows. This creates pockets of shadow and uncertainty, places where threats could hide or where we can't quite see what's happening. The lighting design is very much about controlling information, showing us some things while keeping others obscure. It's cinematic without feeling artificial, using light and shadow to build suspense and focus our attention where the filmmakers want it. The director also uses lighting to delineate between different spaces and tones within the film. Flashback sequences or scenes outside the house often have slightly different lighting qualities that help us orient ourselves in the timeline and understand shifts in setting. Interrogation scenes or moments of confrontation might use harder, more directional lighting that creates dramatic shadows and emphasizes the intensity of the interaction. These are subtle choices that you might not consciously notice on first viewing, but they contribute to the overall effectiveness of the storytelling. Color grading in post-production reinforces the cold, institutional feel that the film is going for. The blues and grays dominate, with warmer tones reserved for specific moments or flashbacks that contrast with the present tension. This chromatic choice supports the emotional landscape of the film, making everything feel slightly hostile and unwelcoming. It's not the most original visual approach you'll ever see in a thriller, but it's executed competently and serves the story, rather than distracting from it. The visuals are in service of the narrative and thematic goals, rather than being flashy for their own sake. The director's use of the frame is generally thoughtful, using composition to convey information about character relationships and power dynamics. When characters are in conflict, they might be placed on opposite sides of the frame with empty space between them, visualizing the emotional distance. When they're conspiring or working together, the framing brings them closer, sometimes even cramping multiple faces into tight shots that emphasize their unity or shared predicament. These are film language basics, but they're employed consistently and effectively throughout. As for runtime, The Last House 2026 clocks in at around 2 hours, which is pretty standard for a thriller of this type. The pacing is deliberate, taking time to establish character and build tension rather than rushing from one action beat to the next. This might test the patience of viewers who prefer their thrillers more kinetic and constantly moving, but it allows for the kind of character development and thematic exploration that the filmmakers are clearly interested in. The film earns its runtime by using that space to deepen our investment in the characters and the moral questions at play, though there are definitely stretches where you might feel like it could have been tightened up. The structure of how that 2 hours is utilized is worth noting. The film doesn't follow a traditional 3-act structure so much as it builds in waves of tension and revelation. There are multiple climaxes rather than one big final confrontation, with each wave of revelations leading to new complications and decisions. This keeps the energy from flagging too much, even in the slower character-focused sections, because you're always moving toward the next piece of information or the next crisis point. Whether this structure works better than a more traditional approach is subjective, but it does help the film maintain momentum across its runtime. Some viewers will wish it was tighter, and honestly, there probably are places where scenes could have been trimmed, or where the pacing could have been brisker without losing essential character or plot information. But there's something to be said for giving scenes room to breathe, for letting moments of decision or realization play out without rushing to the next thing. The film seems confident that the character dynamics and moral questions are interesting enough to sustain attention even when there isn't action happening. And for the most part, that confidence is justified. Looking at the film's performance on Netflix, it's done reasonably well in terms of viewership numbers from what's been reported. It cracked the top 10 in multiple markets during its opening week and has maintained decent viewing figures in the weeks since. Netflix is notoriously cagey about specific numbers, but the indicators we can see suggest it's found an audience. It's not a runaway phenomenon that's dominating cultural conversation, but it's also not a flop that disappeared without a trace. For a mid-budget thriller without superheroes or established IP, that's actually a pretty solid outcome. The algorithm seems to be recommending it to people who watch similar thrillers and procedural content, which makes sense and appears to be working. Viewer completion rates, which Netflix pays a lot of attention to, seem to be decent, suggesting that people who start the film generally stick with it through to the end. That's a good sign because it indicates the pacing and storytelling are engaging enough to maintain interest. There's been a fair amount of social media discussion with people debating the ending and the moral choices characters make, which is exactly the kind of engagement that streaming platforms love because it keeps the title in people's feeds and awareness. In terms of whether it's considered a success by Netflix's internal metrics, that's harder to say definitively from the outside. The platform considers a lot of factors beyond just raw viewing numbers, including cost relative to viewership, whether it's attracting new subscribers or retaining existing ones, and how it fits into their overall content strategy. Given that they've been pushing hard into prestige thriller territory and trying to be a home for mid-budget films that might struggle theatrically, The Last House 2026 probably fits well into their plans regardless of whether it's a massive hit. It's the kind of professional, star-driven content that gives their service credibility and variety. Critical reception has been mixed, but generally tilts toward the positive side of the spectrum. Most professional critics acknowledge the strong performances and the film's ambitions in terms of exploring moral complexity. The ensemble cast gets praise pretty much across the board, with particular call-outs for the work that Damon, Affleck, and Yoon do. Critics seem to appreciate that the film is trying to be thoughtful and isn't just a mindless action vehicle, even if they don't all agree that it fully succeeds in its ambitions. The direction and cinematography also get positive mentions for creating atmosphere and tension effectively. Where critics are more divided is on the script, and specifically whether the moral complexity the film is going for comes across as genuine depth or just muddled storytelling. Some reviewers praise the ambiguity and the refusal to provide easy answers, seeing it as sophisticated and respectful of audience intelligence. Others feel that the ambiguity is less a feature than a bug, that the film is indecisive rather than complex, unable to commit to a perspective or statement. This divide probably says as much about individual critical preferences as it does about the film itself. Some people like their thrillers morally complex and open-ended, while others prefer clearer positioning. The aggregate scores on review sites place the film in the generally favorable but not exceptional range. It's getting scores in the mid-60s to low 70s out of 100 on most aggregate sites, which translates to pretty good but not great in practical terms. That's actually a respectable showing for a streaming thriller, which often faces somewhat harsher critical scrutiny than theatrical releases for reasons that probably have more to do with snobbery about the medium than the actual quality of the work. The audience scores tend to run slightly higher than critic scores, suggesting that general viewers are connecting with the material somewhat more than professional reviewers. The film's strengths are definitely worth highlighting because it does several things quite well. First and foremost, the acting is really solid across the board. The cast takes the material seriously and commits to it fully, which elevates even the scenes where the script might be a bit clunky. Damon and Affleck bring the star power and gravitas you'd expect, but they're also clearly engaged with the characters and the themes rather than just coasting on their names. The supporting cast matches their energy and creates a believable ensemble that you enjoy spending time with even when the plot is putting them through stressful situations. The film also deserves credit for its ambitions in terms of moral complexity and its refusal to provide simple answers to complicated questions. In an era where a lot of thrillers fall back on clear good guys and bad guys, The Last House 2026 tries to exist in the messy middle ground where motivations are mixed, where good people do questionable things, and where the right choice isn't always obvious. That's a harder story to tell and a harder sell to audiences who might want more straightforward heroes to root for. But it's also more interesting and ultimately more rewarding if you engage with it on those terms. The technical craft on display is another strength. The cinematography, production design, editing, and sound design all work together to create a cohesive and immersive experience. The film looks and sounds like a professional production that respects its audience and takes pride in the quality of its craft. Even if you don't connect with the story or characters, you can appreciate the skill that went into constructing the film. It's well made in ways that sometimes get taken for granted, but which separate decent films from amateur efforts. The pacing, while occasionally slow, generally works in service of building tension and development character. The film trusts that we'll stay engaged through dialogue and moral debate rather than needing constant action to hold attention. When action does occur, it's usually well staged and clear, serving the story rather than just being there for spectacle's sake. The balance between contemplative character work and more energetic sequences is reasonably well managed, even if different viewers will have different opinions about whether the ratio is quite right. On the flip side, the film definitely has weaknesses that are worth acknowledging. The script, while ambitious, doesn't always stick the landing on its more complex ideas. There are moments where the dialogue gets a bit too on the nose, with characters essentially stating the themes rather than embodying them through action. Some of the moral debates feel slightly artificial, like intellectual exercises rather than organic conflicts arising from the situation. The film occasionally mistakes complication for complexity, adding twists or reveals that don't necessarily deepen our understanding so much as just make the plot more convoluted. The structure, while interesting in theory, can make the film feel a bit baggy and unfocused at times. The multiple climaxes approach means we don't get one big satisfying peak of tension, which might leave some viewers feeling like the film never fully delivers on the promise of its setup. The resolution of various plot threads doesn't always feel equally developed, with some elements getting thorough treatment while others seem to be wrapped up quickly or left deliberately ambiguous in ways that might feel unsatisfying. Characterization is somewhat uneven, with the main characters getting significant development while some supporting players remain a bit thin. This is understandable given time constraints and the large ensemble, but it does mean that when the film asks us to care about what happens to certain characters, we might not be as invested as we should be because we don't know them well enough. A few more scenes establishing the team's relationships before everything goes sideways might have helped ground the emotional stakes more effectively. The film's ambition to avoid clear moral positioning, while admirable in some ways, can also come across as wishy-washy or unwilling to take a stand. There's a difference between thoughtful ambiguity and just refusing to engage with the implications of what you're depicting. At times, The Last House 2026 flirts with the latter, presenting morally questionable actions without really grappling with their consequences or meaning. Whether this is a legitimate criticism or just a matter of taste depends on what you want from your entertainment, but it's worth noting as a potential issue. So, should you watch it? Well, that depends on what you're looking for. If you want a fast-paced, action-packed thriller with clear heroes and villains and a straightforward plot, this probably isn't going to satisfy you. The film is more interested in moral complexity, character dynamics, and institutional critique than it is in delivering genre thrills in their most conventional form. You need to be willing to engage with the ethical questions it raises and to tolerate some ambiguity in both plot and theme. If that sounds appealing rather than frustrating, you'll probably find something to appreciate here. For fans of the cast, particularly Damon and Affleck together, or Yoon continuing his hot streak, the film is worth checking out just for the performances. Everyone is doing solid work, and there are definitely scenes that showcase why these actors are respected in the industry. If you enjoy watching talented performers dig into complicated characters and moral dilemmas, you'll get that here. The film gives its cast material to work with and opportunities to show range and depth. If you're interested in thrillers that try to do something a bit different from the formula, that attempt to inject some thought and complexity into genre conventions, The Last House 2026 is worth your time. It doesn't fully succeed in everything it attempts, but the ambition is admirable, and the execution is competent enough to make it an interesting watch. You get the sense that the filmmakers care about the ideas they're exploring and aren't just cynically churning out content. There's genuine thoughtfulness here, even when it doesn't entirely work. On the other hand, if you're someone who gets frustrated by moral ambiguity or who wants clear answers and resolutions, you might find the film unsatisfying. If you prefer your thrillers to move at a brisker pace with more action and less talking, the deliberate pacing here might test your patience. It's important to know what you're getting into so you can decide whether it's the right film for your mood and preferences. There's no point watching something that's going to frustrate you when there are plenty of other options available. The Netflix platform actually makes this an easier decision because there's less commitment required than buying a theater ticket. You can start it, and if you're not feeling it after 20 or 30 minutes, you can bail without much investment lost. The first act gives you a pretty good sense of the film's tone and pace, so you can make an informed decision about whether you want to continue. For people on the fence, I'd say give it a shot through the first major sequence in the house and see how you feel. If it's working for you, great. If not, no harm in moving on to something else. Overall, I'd say The Last House 2026 is a solid, if unspectacular, thriller that benefits enormously from its cast and tries to do something a bit more thoughtful than the average genre entry. It's flawed but interesting, ambitious even when it doesn't fully achieve its ambitions, and made with enough craft and care to be worth watching for the right audience. In the vast landscape of streaming content, it stands out for at least trying to engage viewers' brains, along with providing entertainment. Whether that's enough to make it a success depends on your criteria, but it's certainly not a waste of time if the premise and cast appeal to you. The film works best if you go in with appropriate expectations, understanding that it's more of a slow burn character piece with thriller elements than a non-stop action vehicle. Let it be what it is rather than what you might want it to be, based on the marketing or the presence of big-name stars. Appreciate the performances, engage with the moral questions, and don't expect all the answers to be spelled out for you. If you can approach it on those terms, you'll likely find it a worthwhile viewing experience that gives you something to think about beyond just the immediate plot mechanics. For what it's worth, the film has sparked some interesting conversations about institutional corruption, moral compromise, and the question of whether the system can be reformed from within or whether it's fundamentally broken. These are important questions that feel particularly relevant in our current moment, and the film's willingness to engage with them, however imperfectly, is commendable. Art doesn't have to provide answers to be valuable. Sometimes asking the right questions is enough. The Last House, 2026, asks some right questions, even if it doesn't always know what to do with them. In the final analysis, this is a film that respects its audience's intelligence and tries to deliver something with substance along with its suspense. It doesn't always succeed, but the attempt is worth something. The performances alone make it worth watching for anyone interested in seeing talented actors work with material that challenges them. The technical craft is solid, creating an immersive and atmospheric experience that draws you into its world. And if you're willing to engage with the moral complexity and ambiguity, there's genuine food for thought here about justice, loyalty, and the compromises we make in service of the greater good. So that's The Last House 2026 in a nutshell, or rather, in way more than a nutshell, because we've been talking about it for quite a while now. It's a film that's better than it needed to be, but not quite as good as it could have been, landing somewhere in that respectable middle ground of being worth your time without being an instant classic. If you're looking for something to watch on Netflix that will give you solid performances, decent thrills, and something to think about, you could definitely do worse. Check it out and form your own opinion, because ultimately, that's what matters most. Everyone responds to films differently based on their own experiences and preferences, and what doesn't work for one person might really resonate with another. Give it a shot and see where you land. The thing is, movies like this live or die on rewatchability, and that's where The Last House 2026 actually holds up better than you might expect. Once you know where all the pieces fall, going back through it a second time reveals a lot of subtle details and foreshadowing that you probably missed on the first pass. Little looks between characters take on new meaning when you understand their hidden connections. Seemingly throwaway lines of dialogue turn out to be loaded with significance. It's the kind of film that rewards attention and benefits from a second viewing, which is honestly pretty rare in the thriller genre, where the twists are usually the whole point, and once you know them, there's nothing left to discover. What makes it work on repeat viewings is that the character work is solid enough to carry interest even when you know the plot mechanics. You find yourself watching for different things, paying attention to performance nuances and directorial choices rather than just trying to figure out what happens next. You notice how the cinematographer frames certain shots to include or exclude specific characters, creating visual foreshadowing of alliances and betrayals. You catch the way the score subtly shifts when certain characters interact, hinting at tensions that haven't fully surfaced yet. These layers of craft are easy to miss when you're caught up in the propulsive first-time viewing experience, but they're there, and they enrich subsequent watches. I've also been thinking about how this film fits into the broader landscape of Netflix originals and what it says about where streaming content is heading. We're clearly in this interesting transitional period where the lines between theatrical films and streaming films are blurring, and projects like this are sort of caught in the middle. It's got the production values and talent that would have made it a respectable theatrical release a decade ago, but it's being released directly to streaming in a way that fundamentally changes how people interact with it. You watch it at home, maybe pausing to grab snacks or check your phone, in a way that's totally different from the locked-in theatrical experience. Does that change the film itself? Not literally, obviously, the same movie exists, regardless of how you watch it. But I do think the viewing context affects how we experience and evaluate it. The patient pacing that might work beautifully in a theater where you're committed and focused might feel draggy at home, where distractions are everywhere. The moral ambiguity that rewards contemplation might frustrate viewers who are watching while doing 3 other things and just want clear takeaways. Netflix has to navigate this reality, making films that work for the way people actually consume streaming content, while still maintaining enough quality and craft to be taken seriously. It's a tough balance. The Last House 2026 seems designed with this dual reality in mind. It's got enough plot momentum and reveals to keep casual viewers engaged even if they're not giving it full attention, but it also has enough depth to reward focused viewing. The structure with its multiple climaxes works well for streaming, where you might naturally take breaks between viewing sessions, giving you multiple stopping points that feel reasonably conclusive even if the full story isn't done. It's smarter construction than it might initially appear, tailored for the medium even while maintaining cinematic ambitions. Another aspect worth discussing is how the film handles technology and surveillance, which are pretty crucial to both the plot and the themes. The house is wired with cameras and recording devices that capture events and conversations, creating a record that becomes crucial evidence, but also a potential liability depending on who gets access to it. The film uses this surveillance technology to comment on privacy, accountability, and the way that being watched changes behavior. Characters are constantly aware that their actions might be recorded, that there might be proof of what they do and say, and this awareness influences their decisions in interesting ways. The surveillance angle also creates some neat structural opportunities for the storytelling. We get to see events from multiple perspectives through different camera feeds, understanding scenes from new angles that recontextualize what we thought we saw. It's a bit like found footage, but more sophisticated, using the conceit of security cameras and body cams to provide omniscient perspective while maintaining a grounded, realistic approach. The film doesn't go overboard with this device, but it's used effectively when it appears, adding another dimension to how we understand the action. There's also something interesting happening with how the film portrays institutional dysfunction and the ways that bureaucracy can impede justice even when individuals have good intentions. Multiple characters express frustration with having to follow procedures that seem designed to protect the institution rather than achieve fair outcomes. There are rules about chain of custody for evidence, protocols for when different agencies need to be notified, procedures for how information can be shared and with whom. All of these rules exist for legitimate reasons, but the film shows how they can be weaponized or how they can prevent people from doing what they know is right. This institutional critique is one of the more successful thematic elements because it's grounded in specific, concrete examples rather than just abstract complaining. We see exactly how the bureaucracy creates problems, which specific rules are causing which specific issues, and how characters try to navigate or circumvent these obstacles. It feels authentic because it's detailed and specific, clearly informed by research or consultation with people who've worked in these systems. The film earns its cynicism about institutions by showing the work rather than just asserting that systems are broken. At the same time, the film is careful not to completely condemn the institutions themselves or suggest that rules and procedures are inherently bad. There are moments where following protocol actually prevents worse outcomes, where the checks and balances built into the system stop individual actors from making catastrophic mistakes. It's a nuanced portrayal that acknowledges both the necessity of institutional structures and their limitations, which is more sophisticated than a lot of thrillers manage. The film understands that the system is both the problem and potentially part of the solution, which is a complicated truth that doesn't lend itself to easy storytelling, but which feels honest. The ensemble dynamic deserves more attention because it's really central to how the film functions. This isn't a story about one hero with a bunch of sidekicks. It's genuinely an ensemble piece where multiple characters have their own arcs and perspectives. The script makes an effort to give everyone moments to shine, to establish them as individuals with their own backgrounds, skills, and viewpoints. Some of this characterization is more successful than others, admittedly, but the intention to create a real ensemble rather than just supporting players around stars is clear and mostly executed well. What's particularly effective is how the team dynamic evolves under pressure. At the start, they function like a well-oiled machine with established roles and rhythms. Everyone knows their job and trusts the others to do theirs. But as complications arise and secrets emerge, that cohesion starts to fray. Trust erodes, alliances shift, and the team fragments into factions with different priorities and loyalties. Watching that deterioration happen in a way that feels organic rather than manufactured for drama is one of the film's quiet accomplishments. You understand exactly why each fracture occurs and why reconciliation becomes increasingly difficult. The film also does interesting work with the idea of loyalty and what we owe to the people we work with versus what we owe to abstract principles or institutions. Several characters face choices between protecting their teammates and doing what they believe is legally or morally correct. And these aren't easy choices with obvious right answers. The script gives weight to both sides of these dilemmas, acknowledging that loyalty is valuable and that abandoning people who've had your back is genuinely hard, while also showing that blind loyalty can enable terrible things. It's messy and uncomfortable, which makes it feel real. One element that might go overlooked is the sound design, which is actually pretty sophisticated and contributes significantly to the atmosphere. The house has this ambient soundscape of creaks and settling noises, distant sounds from outside, the hum of electrical systems, all layered to create this subtle unease. You're not consciously thinking about it while you watch, but it's working on you, making the space feel alive and slightly threatening. When characters move through the house, their footsteps and movements are captured with enough detail to create real spatial awareness of where they are relative to each other and to potential threats. The score is similarly understated but effective, using strings and subtle electronic elements to build tension without overselling moments. It's not one of those thrillers with bombastic music constantly telling you how to feel. Instead, the score works more like a heartbeat, raising your pulse incrementally so you don't even realize how tense you become until you're there. The composer shows restraint, knowing when to pull back and let scenes play with minimal or no music, trusting that the performances and situation are strong enough to carry the emotional weight. When the score does swell for key moments, it's earned and lands with real impact. There are also smart uses of silence or near silence that create some of the most effective tension in the film. moments where characters are trying to remain undetected or are listening for threats, where the ambient sound drops away and every tiny noise becomes potentially significant. These sequences require technical precision in the sound mix to work properly, balancing silence with just enough audio information to keep viewers oriented. And the team here clearly knows what they're doing. It's the kind of craft that's invisible when it's working, which means it often doesn't get the credit it deserves. Thinking about the film's place in Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's respective filmographies, it's an interesting entry for both of them. They've both moved increasingly into producing and have used that role to create projects they find meaningful rather than just chasing commercial success. This film fits that pattern, tackling subject matter that's maybe not as broadly appealing as a superhero movie or big action franchise, but that offers more room for actual acting and thematic exploration. You can see them using their clout to make the kind of mid-budget, adult-oriented thriller that's become increasingly rare in theatrical release. For Affleck specifically, who's had his ups and downs in the public eye and with his career choices, this feels like a smart move toward material that plays to his strengths without asking him to carry the entire film. He's part of an ensemble, doing solid character work without the pressure of being the sole focus. The performance is lived in and natural, showing an actor who's comfortable in his skin and not trying to prove anything, just serving the story. After some of his more troubled productions and personal struggles that have been well documented, seeing him do good, straightforward work in a project like this feels like a positive trajectory. Damon continues his streak of choosing interesting projects that don't necessarily follow the expected path for someone of his stature. He could coast on big franchise films and voiceover work, but he continues to seek out material with substance, even if it means smaller audiences. His performance here is typically understated and effective, the kind of work that's easy to take for granted because he makes it look effortless. He's never showboating or drawing attention to his technique. He's just fully inhabiting the character and trusting that's enough. And it is, because he's a skilled enough actor that his presence grounds scenes and gives them weight without any obvious effort. The choice to have them work together again after all these years is clearly part of the appeal of the project. Their real-life friendship spans decades, going back to childhood in Boston, and that history informs their on-screen chemistry in ways that can't be faked. They have shorthand and ease with each other that makes their characters' relationship feel authentic and deep. Even when the script has them in conflict, you sense the underlying respect and history that makes the conflict meaningful rather than just arbitrary plot necessity. It's a reminder that sometimes casting is about more than just finding talented actors. It's about finding the right combination of people whose connections serve the story. Steven Yeun's continued rise in Hollywood is worth noting in the context of this film. He's become one of those actors who elevates everything he's in, bringing intensity and intelligence to roles that could be thankless in lesser hands. His trajectory from supporting player on television to leading roles in prestige projects and now to being a key part of ensemble films like this one shows an actor making smart choices and consistently delivering quality work. In The Last House 2026, he's not the flashiest part, but he's crucial to the film's success, providing a grounded, serious presence that anchors some of the more heightened moments. What's great about Yoon's approach to the role is that he finds specificity in what could have been a generic character. The script gives him a tactical specialist, which on the page might not seem like much to work with, but he creates a fully realized person with a particular way of moving, of thinking, of responding to stress. You believe completely in this person's expertise and experience, which makes the moments where that composure cracks all the more effective. He's doing subtle, detailed character work that might not get as much attention as showier performances, but that's essential to making the film's world feel real. Teyana Taylor's presence in the film is part of a broader trend of musicians transitioning into serious acting roles and being taken seriously in that capacity. She's worked hard to develop her craft, and it shows in her performance here. There's no sense of stunt casting or someone out of their depth. She's holding her own completely with veteran actors and bringing real emotional authenticity to her character. The role gives her a range of things to play, from competence and confidence to vulnerability and doubt, and she handles all of it convincingly. What I appreciate about her performance is that she doesn't seem to be trying to prove anything or overcompensate for her relative inexperience in acting compared to her scene partners. She's just doing the work, making honest choices, and trusting that's sufficient. There's a confidence in her restraint, a willingness to be still and simple when that's what the scene calls for, rather than feeling like she needs to do something big to justify her presence. That kind of discipline and trust in the material is the mark of someone who's taking the work seriously and developing real skill. The supporting cast, while we haven't talked about them as much, also contributes meaningfully to the overall texture of the film. Character actors with recognizable faces, if not necessarily names, populate the world, giving even small roles a sense of weight and professionalism. These are people who know how to hit their marks, deliver their lines with conviction, and create specific characters even with limited screen time. It's the kind of casting that might seem like overkill, hiring talented people for parts that might only have a few scenes, but it pays off in making the whole world feel more substantial and real. There's also interesting work being done with gender dynamics and representation, though it's subtle enough that it might not be immediately apparent. The team includes women in roles of authority and expertise, but the film doesn't make a big deal about it or turn it into a statement with a capital S. They're just competent professionals doing their jobs, which is actually more progressive than some films that pat themselves on the back for including women, but then make their gender the most important thing about them. Here, characters are defined by their skills, choices, and moral stances rather than primarily by their gender, which feels like a more mature approach. Similarly, the racial diversity of the cast is present without being the explicit point. People of different backgrounds work together as colleagues, and the film is interested in their professional and moral conflicts, rather than making everything about identity. This kind of casual diversity, where it's just the reality of the world rather than a message the film is trying to send, often works better than more heavy-handed approaches. It normalizes what should be normal, a multiracial, mixed-gender professional environment where everyone's competence is what matters most. The film's attitude toward violence is worth examining because it's more restrained than you might expect from a thriller. There are certainly tense confrontations and moments of physical conflict, but the film doesn't linger on them or fetishize them. Violence, when it occurs, is treated as serious and consequential rather than as spectacle or entertainment. Characters who experience or witness violence are affected by it. There are emotional and psychological consequences that ripple through the story. This more sober approach to depicting conflict feels appropriate given the film's overall tone and thematic interests. This restraint extends to how the film handles other potentially sensational elements. It's not interested in shock value or pushing boundaries just for the sake of it. The focus remains on character, moral complexity, and institutional critique, rather than on delivering increasingly extreme scenarios. Some viewers might find this approach boring or might feel like the film is pulling its punches, but I think it's actually a strength. The film knows what it wants to be about and doesn't get distracted by shiny objects or the temptation to go bigger and more extreme just because it can. The production design creates a really specific sense of place that grounds the film's more abstract concerns in concrete reality. The house, where much of the action takes place, feels like a real location with history and personality rather than just a generic set. There are details in the furnishings, the wear patterns, the way different rooms are decorated and maintained that tell a story about who lived there and how they used the space. This level of specificity might seem like overkill for a thriller where the focus is supposedly on plot and character, but it contributes to the overall authenticity of the world. The attention to detail extends to the more technical elements as well. The equipment the team uses looks and functions like real tactical gear rather than Hollywood props. The way characters handle weapons and tools, the procedures they follow, the terminology they use, all feel researched and accurate rather than made up. For viewers who know about this stuff, these details matter and prevent the film from feeling phony. For viewers who don't, it still contributes to a general sense that we're watching something grounded in reality, rather than pure fantasy. Costume design also does subtle but important work in establishing character and hierarchy within the team. Different members have different levels of gear and different ways of wearing their equipment that reflect their experience, role, and personality. These aren't big, flashy choices that draw attention to themselves, but they create visual distinction between characters and communicate information about them efficiently. You can tell at a glance who's the veteran, who's newer, who's more by the book versus more improvising in their approach just from how they're dressed and equipped. The editing deserves recognition for managing a complicated narrative with multiple timelines and perspectives. Cutting between different POVs, different time periods, and different narrative threads without creating confusion is genuinely challenging, and the editor here generally pulls it off. The rhythm of the cutting serves the story, knowing when to linger and when to move quickly, when to create smooth continuity, and when to use hard cuts for emotional or thematic impact. There are some really nice transitions that connect scenes thematically, even when they're separated in time or space, creating visual and conceptual rhymes that enrich the storytelling. One editing choice that stands out is how the film handles its reveals and twists. Rather than using cheap jump cuts or manipulative techniques to hide information until the big reveal, the editing is generally fair, showing us what we need to see while trusting that we won't necessarily understand the significance until later. Going back on a second viewing, you can see that the information was there, the pieces were on the board, but the cutting doesn't draw attention to them in a way that makes the mystery too easy to solve. It's a respectful approach to audience intelligence that genre films don't always employ. The pacing of the edit contributes to the film's overall deliberate rhythm. Scenes are given room to develop and breathe rather than being chopped up into tiny fragments. This creates a more immersive experience where you settle into scenes and really spend time with the characters rather than just hitting story beats and moving on. For viewers with shorter attention spans or who are used to more frenetic editing, this might feel slow. But for those who appreciate a more considered pace, it allows for deeper engagement with the material and creates space for the performances to really land. Thinking about the film's themes more broadly, there's a consistent interest in the question of how much compromise is acceptable in pursuit of justice or the greater good. Almost every character faces some version of this dilemma, and the film deliberately doesn't provide a single answer that applies to all situations. What's acceptable for one character in their specific context might not be for another. The film trusts viewers to grapple with these questions themselves rather than providing easy answers or clear moral instruction. Some people will find this frustrating, wanting more guidance about who's right and who's wrong, but I think it's actually one of the film's most valuable qualities. Related to this is an exploration of institutional versus individual morality. What does it mean to be a good person within a corrupt or dysfunctional system? Is it enough to try to work within the system to reform it? Or does participation in the system make you complicit in its failures? Can individuals maintain their integrity while serving institutions that sometimes demand moral compromise? These are heavy questions without simple answers, and the film is genuinely interested in exploring them from multiple angles rather than just using them as window dressing for a conventional thriller plot. There's also something interesting happening with the theme of information and truth. In a world where everything might be recorded, where surveillance is ubiquitous and evidence can be comprehensive, you'd think establishing the truth would be straightforward. But the film shows how even objective documentation can be subject to interpretation, how context matters, how the same facts can support different narratives depending on how they're presented and understood. This feels particularly relevant to our current moment, where debates about truth and evidence and what constitutes reliable information are so central to public discourse. The question of who gets to control the narrative, who has the power to shape how events are understood and remembered, runs throughout the film. Different characters and institutions fight for control over the evidence and the story it tells, understanding that whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. The film is savvy about the politics of information in ways that feel contemporary and relevant. It's not just about uncovering the truth, it's about who gets to decide what the truth means and how it's used. Looking at the film's emotional landscape, there's a consistent undercurrent of exhaustion and disillusionment that feels authentic to people who worked in high-stress, morally complex fields for a long time. Many of the characters carry this weariness, this sense that they've seen too much, and that their faith in systems and people has been worn down by experience. The film doesn't mock this cynicism or treat it as something to be overcome through the power of believing in yourself or whatever. Instead, it acknowledges that this is a legitimate response to difficult realities and explores how people function when they're operating from that depleted place. At the same time, there are glimmers of idealism and hope, usually from newer characters who haven't been ground down yet, or from moments where characters choose to do the difficult right thing, even when it would be easier not to. These moments are handled with enough care that they don't feel naive or like the film is suddenly abandoning its more cynical perspective. Instead, they exist in tension with the weariness, creating a complex emotional texture that reflects how most of us actually experience the world, oscillating between hope and cynicism depending on the day and the situation. The relationships between characters provide emotional grounding that prevents the film from becoming too abstract or intellectual in its concerns. Even as it's exploring big themes about justice and institutions, it remains focused on how these issues affect specific people and their connections to each other. The friendships, rivalries, mentorships, and conflicts within the team give us emotional entry points into the larger questions. We care about the moral dilemmas because we care about the people facing them, not just because they're intellectually interesting puzzles. Some of the most effective scenes are quiet conversations between characters where they're just processing what they've experienced or debating what to do next. These aren't big dramatic confrontations with shouting and heightened emotions, just people talking through hard problems and trying to figure out the right path forward. The film has confidence that these conversations can be compelling even without pyrotechnics, and when the writing and performances are strong enough, that confidence is justified. These moments of reflection and debate give the film its soul, preventing it from being just a mechanical thriller moving pieces around a board. The ending has been a point of contention among viewers and critics, and I can understand why. Without spoiling specifics, I'll say that it's deliberately ambiguous in ways that some people find sophisticated and others find like a cop-out. The film doesn't tie everything up in a neat bow or provide clear resolution to all the threads it's been exploring. Some questions are left open, some character fates are uncertain, and the final moral accounting is left for viewers to complete themselves. Whether this works for you probably depends on your tolerance for ambiguity and whether you see it as respectful of audience intelligence or as the filmmakers failing to commit to a position. What I will say is that the ending feels consistent with the film's overall approach. It would be weird for a movie that spent 2 hours exploring moral complexity and rejecting easy answers to suddenly provide a tidy conclusion that resolves all contradictions. The ambiguous ending is true to the film's vision, even if it's not satisfying in a conventional sense. It asks you to sit with uncertainty and discomfort rather than being given the relief of resolution, which is an artistic choice that not everyone will appreciate, but which has integrity within the context of what the film is trying to do. The final images and moments are carefully chosen to leave you with specific feelings and questions rather than answers. There's a wistfulness to the ending, a sense of things being irrevocably changed and of characters having to live with choices they've made. It's more melancholy than triumphant, more complicated than cathartic. For viewers who want to feel good at the end of a movie or who want clear victories and defeats, this might be disappointing. For those who appreciate endings that linger and provoke thought rather than providing easy satisfaction, it might work better. In terms of rewatchability, which I touched on earlier, the ending actually benefits from subsequent viewings because you can trace how the film has been building toward this particular conclusion all along. Details and moments that seemed minor on first viewing take on greater significance when you understand where things are headed. The ending recontextualizes the journey in interesting ways that make you want to go back and see how the pieces fit together. It's the kind of ending that grows on you with time and reflection rather than providing immediate gratification. Comparing The Last House 2026 to other recent thrillers in the streaming space, it's more ambitious and serious-minded than a lot of what's out there. It's not trying to be a fun, breezy watch that you put on in the background. It demands attention and engagement in ways that some viewers will appreciate and others will find too much like work. In the landscape of Netflix content specifically, it stands out for its restraint and its refusal to pander or dumb itself down. Whether that translates to success in terms of viewership and cultural impact remains to be seen, but it's definitely its own thing rather than a copy of more commercially successful formulas. The film also benefits from not being based on existing IP or being part of a franchise, which gives it freedom to tell a complete story on its own terms, without worrying about setting up sequels or serving a larger universe. There's something refreshing about a standalone thriller that exists for its own sake, telling the story it wants to tell, and then ending. In an era of endless franchises and cinematic universes, this kind of self-contained narrative feels almost old-fashioned, but in a good way. You're not watching the setup for future installments. You're watching a complete work that can be judged on its own merits. That said, the film does leave room for interpretation and continued thought after the credits roll, which is different from leaving things open for a sequel. It's interested in provoking ongoing reflection rather than just creating hooks for more content. The questions it raises about justice, loyalty, and institutional dysfunction don't have simple answers, and the film trusts that viewers will continue grappling with them after the specific plot has concluded. This is the kind of film that might inspire good conversations afterward, where people debate what they would have done in similar situations or discuss which character was most justified in their choices. For film students or people interested in the craft of filmmaking, there's a lot to learn from how The Last House 2026 is constructed. The way it handles ensemble dynamics, the balance between action and character development, the use of structure and reveals to maintain interest, the visual strategies for creating atmosphere and tension, all of these are lessons in solid genre filmmaking. It's not going to revolutionize cinema or invent new techniques, but it's a masterclass in executing familiar elements with skill and care. Sometimes that workmanlike professionalism is more valuable than flashy innovation that doesn't quite work. The collaborative nature of filmmaking is on display here in how all the different elements work together toward a unified vision. The direction, writing, performances, cinematography, production design, editing, sound, everything is pulling in the same direction, creating a cohesive whole rather than a collection of disconnected strong moments. This is harder to achieve than it might sound because it requires clear communication of vision and willingness from all departments to serve the overall film, rather than showing off their individual contributions. The fact that The Last House 2026 feels like a unified piece of work speaks to good producing and leadership throughout the process. As we think about what makes this film relevant to contemporary audiences, beyond just the craft elements, there's clearly an attempt to engage with current anxieties about institutional trust and accountability. In a time when faith in institutions is generally low across the political spectrum, when people are increasingly cynical about whether systems serve the public good or just perpetuate themselves, a film exploring these dynamics has built-in resonance. It's tapping into widespread feelings of frustration with bureaucracy, with the sense that rules protect the powerful more than they protect regular people, with the gap between official accounts and lived reality. The surveillance aspects also feel very current as we navigate questions about privacy, security, and the trade-offs between safety and freedom. The film doesn't take a simplistic position that surveillance is all bad or all good. Instead, it shows how it can be both a tool for accountability and a mechanism of control, depending on who's using it and how. This nuanced approach to a hot-button issue feels more useful than the usual polemics, even if it doesn't provide the satisfaction of clear positions to rally around. There's also relevance in the film's interest in moral injury and the psychological cost of doing difficult work in morally complex situations. We're living in a time of increased awareness about trauma, PTSD, and the ways that jobs requiring violence or exposure to suffering affect people's mental health. The film engages with these issues through its characters who are clearly carrying damage from their experiences, even if they function professionally on the surface. It's not the main focus, but it's there, adding texture and authenticity to how these characters are portrayed. The questions the film raises about whistleblowing, going outside official channels, and civil disobedience in service of justice also resonate with contemporary debates. When do you have an obligation to break the rules to serve a higher purpose? What are the consequences of doing so, both practical and moral? How do you weigh personal cost against potential benefit? These are questions that people face in real life, whether they're considering exposing wrongdoing at their workplace or deciding whether to participate in civil disobedience for a cause they believe in. The film's exploration of these dilemmas through its specific scenario can illuminate the general questions in useful ways. Looking at the film's commercial prospects and legacy, it's probably not going to be a massive cultural phenomenon that everyone talks about for years. It's too restrained, too ambiguous, too interested in complexity for that kind of breakthrough. But it might find a devoted audience who appreciates what it's trying to do and who return to it as an example of thoughtful, well-crafted genre filmmaking. Sometimes those smaller, more niche successes are more meaningful and longer-lasting than flash-in-the-pan viral sensations that are forgotten as soon as the next thing comes along. For the careers of everyone involved, it's a solid entry that showcases their abilities without being a defining masterpiece. For Damon and Affleck, it's another example of using their clout to make interesting mid-budget films. For Yoon and Taylor, it's continuing to build their credibility as serious actors. For the director and other craftspeople, it's quality work that should lead to more opportunities. Nobody's winning Oscars for this, but it's the kind of professional, competent work that sustains careers and keeps talented people employed making decent films. The film might also have an afterlife in terms of influence on other filmmakers, particularly those working in the streaming space. It demonstrates that you can make a patient, character-driven thriller for Netflix that doesn't compromise its vision to chase algorithms or viral moments. It shows that mid-budget films with modest ambitions but strong execution have a place in the streaming ecosystem. Other filmmakers might look at its approach to structure, ensemble dynamics, or visual storytelling and incorporate those lessons into their own work. That kind of craft-level influence, while hard to measure, is often how films make their biggest impact on cinema as a whole. From a teaching perspective, this is the kind of film that could generate really interesting classroom discussions about adaptation, about institutional critique, about moral complexity in storytelling. It raises genuine questions without providing easy answers, which is catnip for academic analysis. Students could write compelling papers about the film's use of surveillance technology, its representation of institutional dysfunction, its handling of moral ambiguity, or its ensemble structure. The fact that it's accessible and engaging while also having depth makes it potentially valuable as a teaching text. As I wrap up this extremely long discussion of The Last House 2026, I'm struck by how much there is to say about a film that on its surface might seem like just another thriller. But that's the thing about well-crafted genre films. They provide so much to analyze and discuss precisely because they're working on multiple levels simultaneously. They have to function as entertainment, delivering the pleasures of the genre, while also potentially having something to say about characters, themes, or the world we live in. When a film successfully balances those demands, as this one mostly does, there's naturally a lot to unpack and think about. The experience of watching The Last House 2026 will vary significantly depending on what you bring to it and what you're looking for. If you want escapist entertainment with clear heroes and villains, you'll probably be frustrated. If you want constant action and a breakneck pace, you'll find it slow. But if you want to watch talented actors dig into complex characters, if you appreciate moral ambiguity and thematic depth in your genre films, if you value craft and professionalism, even when it's not flashy, you'll likely find something worthwhile here. It's a film that rewards meeting it on its own terms rather than expecting it to be something it's not trying to be. What I respect most about the film is its seriousness of purpose and its trust in the audience. It's not condescending or trying to manipulate you with cheap tricks. It lays out a complicated situation with no easy answers and asks you to engage with it thoughtfully. Not every viewer will want to do that work, and that's fine. There are plenty of other options available. But for those who do engage, the film offers a richer experience than your typical streaming thriller. It gives you something to think about and discuss, rather than just filling time before you scroll to the next piece of content. In our current media landscape where attention is fragmented and patience is limited, there's something almost radical about a film that insists on taking its time and trusting that substance will win out over spectacle. The Last House 2026 is betting that there's still an audience for this kind of filmmaking, for stories that prioritize character and theme over constant stimulation. Whether that bet pays off commercially is one question. Whether it succeeds artistically is another. I'd argue it achieves what it sets out to do more often than not, even if it's not perfect and even if it won't appeal to everyone. So if you've made it this far in this discussion, you're probably the exact audience this film is targeting. People willing to engage deeply with material, to consider multiple perspectives, to sit with complexity and ambiguity. Give it a watch and see what you think. Form your own opinions about whether the moral complexity is sophisticated or muddled, whether the pacing is deliberate or slow, whether the performances justify the runtime. That's the beauty of art. We can all have different reactions based on our own experiences and preferences, and all those reactions can be valid. The Last House 2026 is the kind of film that will provoke different responses, and that's probably exactly what the filmmakers hoped for.